Ah, look who's still here. Look who kept their eyes open when everyone else begged them to look away. Look who sat in silence, watched the whole theater burn, and still did not flinch. You're the one they never planned for. You are the variable they forgot to account for. The detail they overlooked, the door they thought was locked but was wide open the entire time. You see things, you feel things before they happen. You know things that no one told you, and that right there is the reason they are terrified of you. Not your anger, not your words, your awareness, your unshakable, unsilenceable, devastating awareness. And before we go any deeper, if this is already resonating with you, if you already know you are the kind of person this world was not built to understand, then you need to know about something. The Joker Doctrine, The Art of the Last Laugh. This is not a book for everyone. It is a book for the ones who have been underestimated, dismissed, and counted out and are still here, still calculating, still watching. The ones who know that the last laugh is not the loudest one. It is the one that comes after the silence, after the patience, after the plan. If that is you, you already know where to find it. Now, let's continue. Let's get something clear before we go any further. They are not scared of your weakness. They are not scared of your flaws. They are scared because no matter how carefully they constructed the illusion, you saw through it every time without a manual, without a warning, without anyone holding your hand and pointing to the truth. You just knew. And every single person who has ever tried to deceive you, control you, or rewrite your reality has felt that electric moment. The moment your eyes locked on them and they realize this one knows. That is the most dangerous thing a human being can possess in a world built on illusions. The ability to see clearly. And here's what they never tell you about that gift. It comes with a price. Because the moment you start seeing through people, through systems, through carefully rehearsed smiles and manufactured kindness, you become a threat. Not a threat in the way they pretend, not dangerous in the way they whisper, but threatening in the truest sense. The kind of threat that doesn't need a weapon, the kind that doesn't need to speak, the kind that simply needs to exist and breathe and remain present in the room because your presence alone reminds them of everything they are trying to hide. And people will do almost anything to protect their secrets from a pair of eyes that already know. So yes, this is for you, the one who reads between lines, the one who felt something was wrong before a single word was spoken. The one who watched people celebrate what they claim to love, while quietly undermining it behind closed doors. The one who has been called too sensitive, too paranoid, too intense by the exact people whose masks slipped when you were paying attention. This is for the one who knows too much, not because they went looking for it, but because truth has a way of finding the people who are honest enough to receive it. You are that person. And after today, you will never apologize for it again. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes with seeing clearly. It is not the loneliness of being unloved. It is the loneliness of understanding something in a room full of people who have chosen not to. It is sitting at a table and watching the performance, reading every micro-expression, catching every contradiction, feeling the dissonance between what is said and what is meant, and knowing with cold certainty that no one around you is going to acknowledge it. That loneliness is real, and it has followed you, but it is not a flaw. It is the cost of operating at a frequency most people cannot hear. You were not born suspicious. You were not born cynical. You were born observant. There is a profound difference. The suspicious mind looks for danger in every corner out of fear. The observant mind, your mind, simply notices what is already there. The patterns, the repetitions, the way people's stories shift depending on who is listening. The way certain eyes go flat when they smile. The way the most controlling people always frame their control as care. The way the most dishonest people always speak loudest about honesty. You did not invent these contradictions. You simply refused to ignore them, and that refusal has cost you relationships, opportunities, comfort, and peace. But it has never cost you your integrity, and that is the trade they cannot understand. Think about how many times you have been in a situation and felt it before you could explain it. A job interview where something felt scripted. A friendship where the warmth only appeared when something was needed. A promise made with the exact energy of a person who had already decided not to keep it. You could not always articulate why. You could not always build a logical case, but you felt it. Deep, precise, undeniable. And almost every single time you were right. Not because you are pessimistic, not because you look for problems, but because your nervous system has been calibrated by experience into an instrument of extraordinary precision. You are not paranoid, you are pattern literate. And in a world that profits from confusion, that is a superpower they desperately need you to abandon, so they tried to dismantle it, didn't they? Not always loudly, not always consciously, but the pressure has been there your entire life. You think too much. Not everything is a conspiracy. Why can't you just trust people? You're reading into things that aren't there. Each of those statements was not advice. Each was a quiet attempt to make you doubt the most reliable instrument you possess, your own perception. And for a while, maybe it worked. Maybe you swallowed your instincts. Maybe you chose the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth. But here you are. Still watching, still knowing, still refusing to pretend you don't see what you see. That is not a problem. That is survival at the highest possible level. Because here is what they forget when they tell you to stop overthinking. The people who told you that were almost always the people you were correctly thinking about. The ones who called your perception dangerous were the ones whose behavior could not survive your perception. The ones who labeled your awareness as a mental health issue were the ones most threatened by what your awareness had already uncovered. Your gift did not make you difficult. Their fear of your gift made you difficult to manipulate, and that is an entirely different thing. One they will never admit, and one you should never again forget. Let's talk about what actually happens in the mind of someone who realizes you see through them, because it is not embarrassment, it is not shame, it is not a quiet moment of self-reflection. It is panic, a very specific primitive cold panic, the kind that bypasses logic and goes straight to survival mode. Because the moment they register that, their entire internal architecture shifts. Every false story they have built about themselves suddenly feels unstable. Every illusion they have maintained suddenly requires active defense. And the energy required to manage that around you is exhausting for them. That is why they cannot relax near you. That is why conversations with you feel like interrogations to them. Snorts. Even when you haven't asked a single question, your presence alone is the interrogation. And because panic needs an outlet, it turns into something else. It turns into hostility. It turns into dismissal. It turns into this urgent need to establish that you are the problem. You are unstable. You are the one reading things incorrectly. They will go to extraordinary lengths to reframe your clarity as delusion. They will recruit others to confirm their narrative. They will double down on charm around mutual friends while sharpening the knife behind your back. Not because you did anything wrong, but because a person who sees clearly is a problem that cannot be solved with more lying, and lying is the only tool they have. So when lying stops working, what is left is fear dressed up as aggression, and you have felt that aggression. You have been on the receiving end of the campaign. And somewhere in the back of your mind, even then, you understood exactly what it was. Here is the thing that most people never realize about being feared for your perception. It isolates you from the crowd. Yes, but it also magnetizes the ones who are real. Because there is another type of person in this world, the ones who have been deceived too. The ones who were gaslit, manipulated, rewritten, dismissed. And when those people encounter someone like you, someone who sees clearly and names things accurately, something happens in them that they have not felt in a long time. They feel safe. Not because you are soft, not because you are soft, not because you agree with everything, but because with you the pretense is gone. The performance is unnecessary. The masks can come down. You attract the honest and you repel the fraudulent. And over time, as the false ones fall away and the real ones remain, what you are left with is something most people spend their entire lives searching for. But before that happens, and this part is important, before the real ones arrive and the false ones exit, there is a period of extraordinary discomfort. There is a period where it seems like your gift is actively working against you, where being the one who knows feels like a punishment, where the ones who chose comfortable delusion seem happier, more connected, more celebrated. And in that period, the temptation to close your eyes is overwhelming. To just let the performance continue, to stop noticing, to stop noticing, to stop noticing, to try due perception for belonging. And some people do. They dim themselves down. They learn to perform not knowing. They buy peace at the cost of themselves. But you didn't. You are still here with both eyes open, and that takes a specific kind of courage that the world refuses to name correctly. They will not call it courage. They will call it stubbornness. They will call it inability to move on, inability to trust, inability to heal. But what looks like stubbornness from the outside is from the inside an absolute refusal to betray your own reality. And that refusal, that unshakable commitment to what you actually know to be true, is the single most threatening thing you carry. Not your anger, not your pain, your refusal to pretend. Because in a world full of performances, the person who refuses to perform is the most dangerous presence in every room they enter, and they know it. That is why they never stop watching you. That is why they never stop trying to rewrite you. Because as long as you exist seeing clearly, their version of reality is always 1 second from collapse. Let's be honest for a moment, because this script is not just about power and victory in the throne room. It is also about the weight, the real physical, exhausting, spirit-testing weight of carrying knowledge that no one around you wants to acknowledge. You know what it is like to sit with information and have nowhere to put it. To know that someone is lying and watch everyone else receive that lie as gospel. To feel the wrongness of a situation with every cell in your body and be told that your cells are overreacting. To hold the truth in your hands like something fragile, knowing that if you speak it, you become the problem. That weight is not small. That weight has bent people far stronger than either of us. And the fact that you are still upright, still functional, still carrying it without collapsing says something about your architecture that words cannot fully honor. Because here is what knowing costs on the quiet days. It costs you peace of mind. Not in the way anxiety costs peace, in the way that total clarity costs peace. because you cannot unknow something. Once your perception is landed on a truth, it does not release you. It lives in you. You replay conversations, you track inconsistencies, you notice when someone's energy shifts around specific topics. You log without meaning to every discrepancy between what is said in public and what you witnessed in private. And all of that is happening inside you quietly, constantly, while the world expects you to show up normal, functional, even cheerful. The toll is invisible. The labor is unrecognized. And for a long time, you probably carried it alone because the only people who would understand were the ones you couldn't trust to understand. There is also the grief, and this part is rarely spoken about. The grief of knowing, of seeing someone you loved clearly for the first time and understanding without ambiguity that they are not what you believed. Of watching a version of a person dissolve and being unable to mourn it publicly because mourning requires people to believe what you saw. Of losing not just the relationship but the entire story you told yourself about it. Of grieving someone who is still alive, still present, still performing warmth in the presence of others while you carry the silence of knowing what that warmth actually is. That grief does not have a name, but you know its texture. You have sat with it in the dark, and you came through it still carrying the one thing that caused it, your refusal to lie to yourself. And then there is the loneliness of being right about things you wish you had been wrong about. Every person who sees clearly has a specific graveyard inside them, a graveyard full of moments where they knew and still hoped they were wrong, where they felt the warning and chose to stay anyway, where they read the situation accurately and talk themselves out of it one more time for the sake of peace or love or loyalty, and then it happened exactly as they knew it would, and they had to live in that aftermath holding both the grief and the self-knowledge that they saw it coming. That is not a small thing to carry. That is one of the heaviest combinations a human being can hold. Grief and foresight in the same chest, with no permission to speak either. But here is what that weight has built in you. A kind of quiet strength that does not announce itself. A kind of groundedness that cannot be manufactured or faked. The people who have never carried real weight are visible. They break at the first real pressure. They collapse at the first genuine crisis. They reach for validation and distraction the moment discomfort arrives. But you have been building infrastructure in silence. Every time you carried what couldn't be spoken, every time you felt the full weight of a reality no one else would acknowledge, every time you chose truth over comfort and paid for that choice with isolation, you are constructing something, a foundation, a bedrock, a version of yourself that does not require external confirmation to stand upright. And that foundation built in darkness, tested in silence, forged in the specific fire of knowing too much is what they cannot reach. Now, let's talk about the machinery, the actual mechanism of what happens when people with something to hide encounter someone like you, because it is not random and it is not personal. It is structural. It is the predictable, almost mechanical response of a system that depends on a certain level of unconsciousness in its participants. Think about every environment you have ever entered that felt fundamentally wrong. The workplace where morale was publicly celebrated and privately destroyed. The social circle where everyone performed closeness while quietly keeping score. The relationship where love was the word used and control was the behavior delivered. In each of those environments, there was an unwritten rule, a rule that said, do not look too closely. And you, by simply being who you are, broke that rule repeatedly without even trying. And when that rule is broken, the system responds, not with honesty. Systems built on concealment do not respond to exposure with honesty. They respond with escalation, more pressure, more narrative, more recruitment of witnesses to confirm the agreed-upon version of events. They will suddenly become very interested in your credibility, your history, your patterns. They will locate every mistake you have ever made and magnify it. They will find every person you have ever disappointed and give them a microphone. Not because those mistakes define you, but because your clarity defines them. And they need to discredit the messenger before the message lands. That is not a personal attack. That is a survival reflex, and you seeing it for what it is, rather than internalizing it as evidence of your own unworthiness, is the most critical reframe available to you. Think about the specific tactics, the sudden concern for your mental health which appeared exactly when your perception became inconvenient. The group consensus that you were going through something at the precise moment you started naming something accurately. The way your most truthful observations were met not with counter but with character assassination. The way the conversation always shifted from "is this true?" to "why are you like this?" Because addressing the content of what you see would require confronting the reality of what is there. And that is the one thing they cannot afford. So instead they attack the container. They question your stability, your motives, your history, your mental state, not to help you, to neutralize you. Because here is what they underestimated. They underestimated the difference between silencing someone and convincing them. They thought if they made the cost of speaking high enough, you would not only stop speaking, you would stop knowing. That if they isolated you from enough people, you would begin to doubt your own perception. That if they flooded the space with enough noise, enough counterative, enough social consensus, the truth inside you would quietly dissolve. But perception is not a belief. You cannot argue someone out of what they directly observe. You could not consensus vote away what a person clearly saw with their own eyes. Truth witnessed is not truth borrowed. It lives differently. It holds differently. It cannot be taken back by the people who wish it had never been seen. So yes, they need you to stop seeing. They need you to stop seeing. They need you confused. They need you self-doubting, over-apologizing, questioning the validity of your own experience. They need you to trade your lens for their narrative. And everything they have done, every social campaign, every whisper, every sudden concerned intervention about your state of mind has been in service of that singular goal, not your well-being, your blindness. And now that you understand the goal, now that you can see the machinery clearly, none of it has the same power anymore, because a trap only works on someone who doesn't see it, and you have been seeing it this whole time. The game is not new, only your understanding of it has sharpened, and that sharpening, that is where they lost you permanently. Let's talk about what happens to them at night. Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, but because you deserve to understand the actual consequence of being the kind of person you are. Because the narrative they pushed was that your perception punished you, that your awareness isolated you, that seeing clearly was the thing that cost you everything. And while some of those costs were real, the other side of that ledger has never been spoken. So let's speak it now. The people who lied to you, manipulated you, attempted to rewrite your reality, they did not walk away clean. They walk away haunted. Because there is a very specific kind of haunting that follows you when you have tried to deceive someone who saw through the deception and said nothing. You became a presence in their life that they cannot account for because they expected you to explode. They expected you to retaliate. They expected you to go loud with what you knew, to drag it into the public arena, to give them the reaction that would have confirmed their version of events, which required you to be the villain, and you didn't. You absorbed it. You processed it in private. You made your decisions quietly and moved in a direction they couldn't predict. And that non-reaction, that silence that carried weight instead of noise, broke something in them because they had no defense for it. Every manipulation tactic they had was designed for a reactive target, and you did none of those things. You simply knew and kept knowing and kept moving. And now there is a version of you living in their head that they cannot evict. Not the version they described to others. Not the version they invented to justify their behavior. The real version. The one that sat there and said nothing and saw everything. The one that looked at them and understood exactly what they were doing before they had even finished doing it. That version of you follows them into conversations where your name comes up, into quiet moments when the performance drops into the space between waking and sleeping, when the mind refuses to cooperate with the lies it has been asked to maintain. They do not sleep the way they used to, not since they realized you saw it all, not since they understood that you chose silence not out of ignorance, but out of a specific deliberate decision. Because here is what your silence communicated that your words never could have. It said, I see you. I know what this is. I know what you did. And I do not require your confession, your apology, or your acknowledgement to know my own truth. I do not need you to admit it for it to be real. I do not need a witness to validate what I directly experienced. I am not waiting for your honesty. I have already accounted for its absence. That kind of silence is not weakness. That kind of silence is sovereignty. It removes their power completely. Because power over a person depends on that person needing something from you. And when you stop needing any of those things, the power they thought they held dissolved completely, permanently.